In the heart of a dense, misty forest, where towering pines whispered secrets to the wind, a lone bear stood at the edge of a clearing. He was a magnificent creature, once strong and proud, but now a shadow of his former self. His fur, once thick and glossy, had dulled over time, and his deep, amber eyes carried a quiet sorrow. For 6 long years, he had waited in the same place, staring toward the horizon, as if expecting something or someone to return. The story of this bear was unlike any other. He was not lost, nor was he searching for food or shelter. Instead, he remained in this very spot, bound by an invisible thread of hope and longing. The place where he waited held memories of warmth, of companionship, of a family that had once been his whole world. But they were gone now, taken away by fate in a cruel twist of events, leaving him behind in a world that felt far too empty. At first, the locals who lived near the forest noticed the bear's presence and thought he might move on. Days passed, then weeks, and yet he remained. Hunters and hikers alike began to recognize him, his unwavering patience stirring something deep within them. They called him the Waiting Bear, a name that carried both admiration and sadness. Through scorching summers and harsh, unforgiving winters, he endured it all. His body grew leaner, his movements slower, but his heart never wavered. Some believed he had given up, that he was merely existing rather than living. Others whispered that perhaps he was holding on to a memory too precious to let go. Whatever the reason, the bear stayed, his quiet vigil turning him into a legend among those who knew his tale. And then, one day, when it seemed all hope had faded, something extraordinary happened, something no one could have predicted, a miracle that would change everything. The morning was crisp, the sky painted in soft hues of pink and orange as the sun slowly stretched its light over the vast forest. Deep within the trees, a wildlife conservationist named Daniel trudged through the underbrush, his boots crunching against frost-kissed leaves. He had spent years studying the region's wildlife, tracking the movements of various animals. But there was one creature that had captured his heart more than any other, the Waiting Bear. Daniel had first heard whispers of the bear's story from the locals, tales of a lonely giant who refused to leave the place where his family was last seen. Skeptical at first, he had ventured out to see for himself, and what he found had shaken him to his core. The bear was indeed real, standing motionless by the same riverbank, staring into the distance as if frozen in time. He wasn't just a wild animal. He was a living symbol of loss, patience, and devotion. Over the years, Daniel visited whenever he could, watching over the bear from a safe distance. He left food nearby when the harsh winters made hunting difficult. He spoke to him in gentle tones, though he never expected the bear to understand. And yet, there was something in the way the bear lifted his head at the sound of Daniel's voice, something that told him he wasn't just another passing stranger. But this morning was different. The moment Daniel stepped into the clearing, he felt it in his bones. The bear was lying on his side, his great body rising and falling in shallow, labored breaths. His once powerful limbs trembled with weakness, his fur matted with dirt and ice. Panic surged through Daniel. He rushed forward, heart pounding. "Hey, big guy," he murmured, crouching a few feet away. "I'm here." The bear's eyes flickered open, dull and weary. Daniel immediately radioed for help. "I have a severely malnourished bear here. He's not going to make it much longer without intervention." His voice wavered slightly, but he forced himself to stay calm. Help was coming, but time was slipping away. Without hesitation, he pulled a protein bar from his pack, unwrapped it, and extended it toward the bear. It was a small offering, but it was something. To his relief, the bear sniffed the air and weakly licked the food from Daniel's hand. It wasn't much, but it was a sign that the fire inside him hadn't completely gone out. Minutes stretched into eternity as Daniel sat with him, whispering reassurances, promising that help was on the way. Then, at last, the rumble of an approaching vehicle broke the silence. A rescue team arrived. a group of experienced wildlife specialists carrying tranquilizers and transport equipment. They worked quickly, knowing the bear wouldn't survive another brutal winter alone. As the tranquilizer took effect, Daniel knelt beside the massive creature, placing a reassuring hand on his fur. "You've waited long enough," he whispered. "It's time to start a new chapter." For the first time in 6 years, the waiting bear was no longer waiting. He was being saved. The bear's new home was a vast wildlife sanctuary, a place where animals who could no longer survive in the wild were given a second chance. The dense woods and open meadows stretched for miles, offering a peaceful contrast to the harsh isolation he had endured for so many years. But despite the safety and care surrounding him, he remained distant, his gaze still searching for something that no longer existed. Daniel visited him daily, speaking in soft tones, offering food, and watching over him with quiet patience. The bear, whom the sanctuary staff had named Cody, accepted the care, but something inside him remained locked away. He would eat, he would rest, but the spark of life was missing. Then, something unexpected happened. One late afternoon, as Cody lay near the edge of his enclosure, staring at the swaying treetops, a small creature trotted toward him. It was a dog, scruffy, energetic, and completely unafraid. The sanctuary had several rescue dogs who roamed freely, but this one, a golden-furred mutt named Charlie, had never shown much interest in the larger animals. That day, however, something drew him to the massive bear. Cody's ears twitched at the approaching sound of light paw steps. He turned his heavy head, his deep amber eyes locking onto the curious dog standing a few feet away. Charlie, tail wagging, tilted his head as if considering his next move. For a moment, neither moved. Then, in a bold act of defiance against common sense, Charlie bounded forward and playfully barked. Daniel, watching from a distance, tensed. He had no idea how Cody would react. After all, he had spent years in solitude, mourning his lost family. Would he see the dog as a threat? Would he ignore him? To his amazement, Cody simply huffed and lowered his massive head back down. Charlie, however, was undeterred. He trotted closer, sniffed the bear's massive paw, and then, in an almost comical display of confidence, plopped himself down beside Cody as if they had always been friends. The bear exhaled slowly, as if sighing in resignation. Over the next few days, something extraordinary began to happen. Wherever Cody went, Charlie followed. If the bear rested in the shade, Charlie curled up beside him. If Cody wandered to the far end of his enclosure, Charlie trotted alongside, his short legs struggling to keep pace, but never giving up. At first, Cody tolerated the presence. He didn't react much, but he also didn't push Charlie away. Then, one evening, Daniel witnessed something he never thought he'd see. Charlie, ever the troublemaker, had found a small stick and, with great enthusiasm, nudged it toward Cody's giant paws. The bear blinked slowly, unbothered. Charlie tried again, pawing at the stick and nudging it closer with his nose. This time, Cody lifted his paw ever so slightly, tapping the stick in return. It was small, barely anything at all, but it was something. Day by day, Cody softened. When Charlie wagged his tail and yipped happily, the bear would watch with quiet amusement. When the dog lay beside him, he no longer just tolerated it, he accepted it. And then came the moment that melted Daniel's heart completely. One particularly cold morning, Cody sat at the base of an old oak tree, his breath forming small clouds in the crisp air. Charlie, shivering slightly, approached him, his eyes full of trust. Without hesitation, the massive bear shifted ever so slightly, allowing the small dog to press against his thick fur. It was the first real sign of warmth Cody had shown to another soul in years. Daniel exhaled, a slow smile spreading across his face. The waiting bear, the one who had endured years of solitude and sorrow, had finally found something worth staying for. A friend. Days turned into weeks, and what had begun as an unexpected companionship blossomed into something truly special. Cody, once a solitary soul burdened by years of loss, was now learning something he had long forgotten. joy. And the source of that joy came in the form of a scruffy, golden-furred dog who refused to leave his side. One morning, Daniel arrived at the sanctuary just in time to witness a sight he never thought possible. The mighty bear, once slow and lethargic, was moving with a lightness that seemed almost playful. Charlie dashed through the grass, tail wagging, barking excitedly as he darted around Cody's massive paws. The bear watched him with an amused expression, his deep amber eyes soft with something new, affection. Then, in an almost unbelievable display of trust, Cody lifted one of his gigantic paws and gently swiped at Charlie. Not with the force of a wild animal, but with the restraint of a friend engaging in play. Charlie yelped in excitement and lunged forward, tagging the bear's leg with his tiny paw before sprinting away, initiating a game of chase. At first, Cody simply watched, but then, to everyone's astonishment, he moved. Slowly at first, then, with more ease, the great bear began to lope after his tiny companion. The ground trembled beneath him, but his movements were careful, controlled. He wasn't hunting, he was playing. Daniel stood frozen, a lump forming in his throat. It was the first time he had seen Cody move with such purpose, without the weight of sorrow holding him back. As time passed, their bond grew deeper in ways no one could have expected. Charlie, bold as ever, started teaching Cody things he had never known. At night, when the air turned crisp, Charlie would curl up beside the bear, pressing his small body against Cody's thick fur. At first, Cody had remained still, unsure of what to do with such open affection. But one evening, something changed. Daniel arrived to check on them and found Charlie fast asleep against Cody's side. And for the first time, Cody had moved, not away but toward him. His massive head was resting gently atop the small dog, as if drawing comfort from his presence. It wasn't just nighttime companionship, either. Charlie had a way of getting Cody to explore parts of the sanctuary he had previously ignored. Whenever Charlie trotted off to sniff at a new scent, Cody would watch for a moment before lumbering after him, curiosity replacing hesitation. One particularly memorable afternoon, Daniel watched in awe as Charlie led Cody to a shallow pond at the far end of the sanctuary. The bear had always avoided water, as if too weighed down by memories to engage in something as simple as wading through a stream. But Charlie, completely unfazed, bounded into the water and began splashing around with wild abandon. Cody stood at the edge, watching, his ears twitching at the sight of his companion's carefree joy. Then, ever so slowly, he stepped forward. The water lapped at his massive paws. He hesitated, then took another step, the cool liquid rushing over his thick fur. Charlie barked excitedly, running in circles as if encouraging him to keep going. And Cody did. Within minutes, the great bear was standing knee-deep in the water, watching Charlie chase ripples and snap at the reflections. A low, rumbling sound filled the air, soft and deep. It wasn't a growl. It was a laugh. Daniel wiped at his eyes, overwhelmed by what he was witnessing. The waiting bear, once frozen in time, locked in a prison of his own sorrow, was coming back to life. And it was all because of Charlie. As the days passed, the changes in Cody became undeniable. He no longer lingered in one spot, lost in memories of the past. Instead, he followed Charlie, learned from him, even mirrored his behavior in small ways. When Charlie ran to greet Daniel at the gate, Cody would lumber behind, standing at a distance, but present in a way he had never been before. When Charlie rolled onto his back for belly rubs, Cody would stretch out beside him, basking in the warmth of the sun. And when Charlie nudged his head against Cody's massive paw in a quiet show of affection, the bear responded, not with indifference, but by gently nudging him back. It was a bond that defied nature, a connection that no one could have predicted. And yet, it was the most natural thing in the world. Not all days were easy. Despite the growing bond between Cody and Charlie, there were still moments of struggle. Moments when the past threatened to pull Cody back into the shadows of his sorrow. One such moment came during a late autumn storm. The sky had darkened with thick, rolling clouds, and the wind howled through the trees, carrying the scent of rain. As the first heavy droplets began to fall, Cody retreated to the farthest corner of his enclosure, pressing himself against a thick oak tree. Daniel, watching from a distance, knew exactly what was happening. Storms had always unsettled Cody. Perhaps they reminded him of a time long ago, of the night his family was taken from him, when the world had changed forever. The low rumbling of thunder made him restless, and, as the storm intensified, his massive frame trembled slightly, his breaths coming faster. Charlie, ever the fearless one, trotted toward him, completely unbothered by the rain matting his golden fur. He stopped a few feet away, tilted his head, and watched the bear with quiet concern. Then, with deliberate steps, he moved closer and pressed himself against Cody's thick leg. Cody didn't react at first. His eyes remained fixed on the dark sky. But then, after a long moment, he shifted, just slightly, leaning into Charlie's warmth. The dog didn't move. He simply stayed, grounding his friend in the present, reminding him that he wasn't alone. By the time the storm passed, Cody had calmed, his breath steady once more. It was a small moment, but it meant everything. As Cody grew stronger, Daniel began introducing him to new areas of the sanctuary, gradually expanding his world. But there was one place he refused to go, the front enclosure, where visitors occasionally came to observe the rescued animals from a safe distance. Cody would follow Charlie anywhere, through the meadows, to the pond, even into the shaded groves where the other sanctuary animals roamed. But the moment he saw people, strangers, his body tensed. He remembered humans, and not all memories were kind. Daniel knew that forcing him to interact would only deepen his fear, so he let Cody take things at his own pace. Charlie, however, had other ideas. One afternoon, as Daniel sat near the fence line, Charlie trotted confidently toward him, tail wagging. He plopped down at Daniel's feet and barked, looking expectantly at Cody. The bear remained still, watching from a distance. Charlie barked again, this time running halfway back to his friend before looking over his shoulder. Cody shifted, uneasy, but when Charlie wagged his tail and let out a softer, encouraging bark, something in the bear's expression changed. He took a tentative step forward, then another. When he reached Charlie's side, he paused, looking up at Daniel with quiet hesitation. Daniel didn't move. He simply sat there, allowing Cody to decide. After a long moment, Cody exhaled and lowered his head, nudging Charlie before sitting beside him. It wasn't a grand breakthrough, but it was progress. The bear who once kept his distance was learning, slowly, carefully, that not all humans were something to fear. One evening, as the sanctuary settled into the golden hues of twilight, an unexpected visitor arrived. A stray coyote, thin and desperate, slinking too close to the enclosures in search of food. Charlie, ever the protector despite his small size, stood alert, barking fiercely at the intruder. The coyote hesitated, sizing up the small dog. Then, before anything could escalate, a deep, rumbling growl filled the air. Cody had risen to his full height, standing beside Charlie with a quiet, powerful presence. His massive form cast a long shadow, his stance unwavering. He didn't lunge, didn't chase, but his message was clear. Charlie wasn't alone. The coyote, recognizing the unspoken warning, backed away and disappeared into the forest. Charlie barked triumphantly before looking up at his giant protector, tail wagging with pride. Cody, in response, let out a soft huff, the closest thing to a bear's version of a chuckle. The two of them, against all odds, had become each other's safe place. The morning started like any other. A crisp breeze rustled the trees, and the sanctuary stirred to life as the animals stretched and greeted the day. Cody and Charlie, as usual, lay side by side beneath their favorite oak tree, soaking in the gentle warmth of the rising sun. But then something changed. A sharp crack echoed through the sanctuary. A tree branch, weakened by the previous night's storm, snapped and tumbled down into Cody's enclosure, landing with a loud thud near the fence. The sudden noise sent a jolt of panic through the massive bear, triggering something buried deep in his memory, a reminder of the past, of the night everything had been taken from him. Before Daniel or any of the sanctuary staff could react, Cody bolted. He wasn't thinking, wasn't seeing the world around him, only the desperate instinct to run. In his confusion, he charged toward the enclosure gate, pushing it open with sheer force. The sanctuary had never seen him act this way before, never seen him afraid like this. Cody had spent 6 years waiting, trapped in grief. And now, for the first time, he was running. Charlie reacted instantly. The small dog, sensing his friend's distress, sprinted after him. Cody, blinded by panic, didn't notice him at first, his massive paws pounding against the ground, his breaths coming in sharp, heavy bursts. Daniel called out, his voice urgent. "Charlie, no." But Charlie didn't stop. He raced ahead, weaving through the trees, and then did the only thing he could. He threw himself directly in front of Cody's path. Cody skidded to a halt just in time, his great body trembling, his breath ragged. His eyes were wild, searching, lost. Charlie, panting hard, took a step closer, then another. He let out a single, soft bark, not a frantic yelp, not a fearful cry, but something gentle, something familiar. Cody blinked. The haze of fear began to clear. He looked down at his small companion, who stood unwavering before him, golden fur ruffled by the wind. And then, finally, he exhaled. Slowly, his massive frame lowered to the ground. The bear, once desperate to escape, now lay still, his breathing steadying. Charlie stepped forward and pressed his head against Cody's thick fur. Daniel and the sanctuary staff, who had been ready to intervene, stood frozen in awe. They didn't need to do anything. Charlie had already done it. The bond they had built, the trust, the love, had saved Cody from himself. After a long, silent moment, Cody stood, shaking out his fur. But this time, he wasn't running. He turned, his great head dipping toward Charlie in gratitude, before slowly making his way back home. And Charlie, as always, followed. Months passed, and with each day, Cody and Charlie's bond only grew stronger. The once lonely bear no longer sat by himself, staring into the distance with longing. Instead, he explored, played, and, most importantly, lived. The sanctuary staff marveled at the transformation. Cody, who had spent 6 long years waiting for something he would never get back, had finally found something new, someone new, to hold on to. Charlie remained his constant companion, always by his side, whether they were resting beneath the oak tree or wading through the shallow pond. But it wasn't just Cody who had changed. Charlie had, too. The scrappy, fearless little dog had found a purpose beyond himself. He had given Cody a reason to trust again, to heal. And in return, he had found the most unlikely yet devoted protector. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Daniel sat near the enclosure, watching them. Charlie lay curled up against Cody's massive side, his small body rising and falling with each slow, steady breath of the bear. Cody, once lost in grief, now radiated quiet contentment. Daniel smiled. Love had found his way to Cody in the most unexpected form. Not through another bear, not through the family he had waited for, but through a small, persistent dog who refused to leave his side. As the stars blinked to life in the sky, Cody gently rested his head over Charlie, a silent promise that, no matter what, they would always have each other. And for the first time in a long, long while, Cody was no longer waiting. He was home.